It's 43% cheaper to give a homeless person a home, a place to live, food, medical care, and training than it's to leave them on the streets. 43% cheaper, because for many areas, more than half the police time, and police are very expensive, are used managing homeless people. A lot of the time of the fire department is being called out on emergency calls for homeless people. A lot of the emergency room visits and hospitals are used for homeless people. So one homeless person, if they call regularly, can use $100,000, $200,000 of $300,000, $400,000 where they could be housed and provided with lots of services for $18,000 to $20,000 a year.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who's out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode. Hey, welcome to The Exploding Human. My name is Bob Nickman. My guest today is Stuart Perlman. Stuart is a psychotherapist, psychoanalyst, and an artist who paints pictures of the homeless in order to raise awareness. More about that in a minute. First, I want to invite you to visit my website, theexplodinghuman.com. Over there, you can listen to episodes, read synopses, see photos of my guests, a little bio on myself. There's a donate button if you'd like to support the show through Patreon. Thank you very much. There is also the Exploding Human with Bob Nickman YouTube channel. You can listen to the episodes there. And the Exploding Human Facebook page. Much appreciation for you guys tuning into the show. My guest today, as I said, is Stuart Perlman. Stuart has been a psychotherapist, psychoanalyst for 4 decades. Much of his practice is dealing with serious trauma. He has spent the last 12 years painting very large portraits of people who are experiencing homelessness. Today we're going to be talking about Stuart's paintings and the accompanying book with stories about the people he has met. He goes down to Skid Row and befriends many of the folks living there and paints their portraits, and they're absolutely extraordinary. We're going to be talking about that as well as the trauma that most people who are experiencing homelessness have gone through prior to being homeless and while homeless, some of the solutions, some of the statistics that are going on with that population, and how we can better work to solve some of these issues. Stuart is a very compassionate and wise gentleman with a lot of experience in this territory. I'm going to let the episode speak for itself. Here he is. This is Stuart Perlman. I am so happy to be here in your home, surrounded by these beautiful paintings. Let's start with having you tell people how they might view these paintings, maybe while we're talking.
Great. Well, I have a website, and that's the best place. It's just my name and artist.com. Stuart, S-T-U-A-R-T, Perlman, P-E-R-L-M-A-N, artist.com. And what I'd like you to know when you look at the paintings is that 2 things. One is a lot of the paintings are 5 feet tall and 4 feet wide. So almost as tall as a person and much wider than the widest person. And at the same time, what doesn't come across in digital images is that I use very, very thick paint. So some of the paint is a half inch to almost an inch deep, and I paint with my fingers in nitrile gloves, and I use globs of paint, so it's almost like clay and like I'm doing sculpture.
There's an interesting aspect to that just sort of struck me. There's a grounding feeling to having a little bit more heft and weight to having thick paint.
Yes.
It's almost like you're well, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but it's almost like you're grounding yourself while you're doing it.
Well,
or you're grounding the person, or there's something important about the weight of it. What is that?
Well, I think that you're capturing something. So all of these homeless people that I've painted, I spend hours and hours with, and some of them I've known for decades. Some of them, and many people, it's, like homeless people have been physically and emotionally attacked, and a lot of them have very abused backgrounds, and so they don't trust people. And so it's taken me years, sometimes 25 or 30 contacts, talking to the same person to get them to allow me to paint them. And they have to sign a release, and I pay them, and I give them all sorts of supplies, food, clothing, medical supplies. And so they walk away with a bounty. But I have to marinate myself in the person, and I many times do this sitting behind a garbage bin in an alleyway, or many different places, Skid Row, where there's needles and guns and knives, and it's pretty dangerous. But I spend my time there so that I can marinate and take in deeply what they're experiencing and what their lives are like on a historical level. Remember, I'm a psychoanalyst. And I've been a psychoanalyst and a psychologist for 47 years of treating some of the most severe trauma survivors. And I'm in there sitting with these people, and they come to trust me over a long period of time, and they spill their guts, and I take it in. One of the problems with my life is that I don't have enough armor. So I'm very permeable. I take people's experience in, and I ground myself in them, and then I ground and etch it into the paint, all the experiences that I've taken in from the person I'm painting.
Well, that's an interesting thing you just talked about, the idea of taking it in, because you need to, if you're looking at any of these paintings, folks, and you look at the eyes of these people, you know that Stuart is in there. He's inside of them when he's painting them. You can feel it, and you can see it in the eyes of the paintings, and, along with the facial expressions, but it really comes out in the eyes. And this idea of in order to do that, you have to connect in a way that I'm sure is painful.
It's very. I will go home after getting to know someone, and I will cry. I cry a lot over this project, because these people are people who've been broken and beaten and abused and violated repetitively over and over again. That's part of the message. So I've painted and interviewed very deeply 250 homeless people experiencing homeless, human beings experiencing homelessness. And almost every single one of them, if you get to know them very well, has been a massive trauma survivor before they were homeless, contributing to their homelessness. And once they're on the streets, they are repetitively traumatized, many times by other human beings who physically and emotionally attack them. There have been articles recently in like the New York Times about people killing homeless people, especially white male homeless people. And they are repetitively, the painting over there is this 18-year-old girl who was attacked by multiple guys with a wrench, and they smashed her skull. And, so these people, these are real horrible experiences, and that people need to take in that when people are run over by a car, usually they take them to a hospital. When someone is emotionally and traumatized, people usually just try to ignore it because it's painful to see the trauma. It's painful to take in the vulnerability that we all have, that in a quick moment, someone could end our happiness, could destroy our lives, could maim us in a way that may take the rest of our lives to try to just cope with.
There's a feeling, and I'm not going to say that I don't have it because I have had it. When I look at somebody who's in a really bad place,
yes,
I don't want to catch it.
You don't want to catch it.
I don't want to catch it.
That's right.
So do I want to interact and be kind? Well, I'm never cruel, ever. Sometimes I avoid, and sometimes I will reach out, but I'm not certainly going to Skid Row and having conversations with people to illuminate that problem, which is really a very high calling, in my opinion. And thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
Because that message that you were just talking about of here's somebody that was traumatized prior to becoming homeless, and it begins a cycle of abuse and neglect, and if there isn't a compassion for that, it's going to continue. And I think that's really what you're trying to get across, is this idea that, hey, this could be you.
This could be you. We're all one thin experience away from being traumatized and bad things happening that are bad enough to unhinge us from our lives. You know, I have met football stars, I have met lawyers and doctors, and I have met commodities brokers and businessmen who owned 5 or 6 houses and boats, and they've had experiences that so demolished them that their lives and their things and their money have no meaning to them, and they wandered the street. One story that always tears at my heart is a guy was a veteran at the Air Force. He started working for a major construction company, and he oversaw building skyscrapers, gigantic, very successful, lots of money, a wife and 3 children. He gets a call one day from the sheriff's office saying a drunk driver killed his wife and all his children. He fell apart, started taking drugs, wandered the country, and ended up on the beach in Venice Beach. And I had gotten to know him extensively, and he has been so devastated by that loss that he let money, they meant nothing to him. He even, I think, felt tremendous guilt over being alive when they were dead. And I think there's an element of punishing himself. And, and he's, so not all of this is black, but VASH, Veterans Assistance Program, actually found out about him and got him housing, and he's a success story. He was on the streets for 7 years, and they've got him housing, but he's still a very sad person.
Yeah, I have met a number of veterans that are being housed at on the VA campus through a joint effort with Step Up on Second and some government funding, and these guys were homeless, and now they have housing on the campus. And I was doing some volunteer stuff over there, and it's amazing how some of these guys were telling me how they were treated when they were on the street. One guy said he fell in a crosswalk and nobody would help him. Cars were honking, and finally he goes, 2 young guys picked me up and took me to the side of the road and called an ambulance. But he goes, people didn't want to get near me.
Yes.
And I had a guy, a couple weeks ago, I was coming out of the phone company, the AT&T store. I'm not plugging that company, by the way. I was coming, and there was a guy, he had fallen on the sidewalk out of his wheelchair, and he was just a wreck, and nobody was helping him. So my wife and I called an ambulance and stayed with him till they got there. And he was a wreck, man. He was, his wheelchair was not a good wheelchair. It didn't have footrests, and he smelled terrible. I mean, he was not somebody I really felt like picking up, but I did. I was like, ooh, okay. Just because, partly because of what we've talked about, that you have illuminated the fact that, who knows what happened to this guy. You don't know.
Yes, you don't know their lives. It's very interesting that when I start sitting with people and talking with them, a person, a human being, but they seem like a piece of garbage destroyed on the streets, and I'll sit down and I'll start talking with them, and you'd be surprised, the more that I treat them like a human being, the more that I listen to them, the more that they can talk and I really listen. It's almost like watering this wilted flower that begins to stand up and blossom, and then their voices become firmer and their ideas become more coherent, and they're like these interesting, smart human beings.
Yeah, and I think some people just look at it as like, well, they're homeless because they're lazy, they don't want to work, they're whatever it is that is, it's like victim blaming in a sense. It's like you're that way because you're supposed to be, and I'm I'm doing well because I'm supposed to be doing well. And
Yes.
It's a lot more random than that. And who's to say what event takes somebody to that place, and who's to say why maybe the same event doesn't? I don't know.
Well, but it's not just one event. Many of these people started off in homes where the mother was addicted to drugs and was a prostitute, and they are living there in this horrible setting, and they never got an education, and they never had a place to live, and no one ever took care of them, and they just had to be a street person and survive. So that there's a high percentage of people who've had horrible starts in their lives. But there also is, let's face it, given the cost of living in Los Angeles, that people, especially now after the pandemic, have lost a lot of jobs, and it's hard to make enough money to pay rent. The rents have skyrocketed.
Rent, food, everything.
Everything has
Insurance, cars.
skyrocketed. It's very hard to make a living such that you can live.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it was when we were kids, where, a guy could work, his wife didn't work, he'd put 2 kids through college and buy a home and have a couple of cars, and it was, he worked, but it wasn't like this complete and total heavy struggle every day of worry and whatever has happened in our society to take away that middle class kind of ability to be successful, even at a medium level, is really sad, really sad.
And I think that you didn't see many, at least in LA. You didn't, when I got to LA, 50 years ago, I didn't see homeless people around much at all. And things have deteriorated. Our standard of living has suffered. The supports that we used to get from the government, and the availability of jobs and cheap housing and cheap education, cheap college, that's not there anymore. So life is much harsher, much harder struggle.
So you were telling me about cost of taking care of somebody who's homeless, as opposed to dealing with it on the back end when there's big problems.
So we're a society that is not making rational decisions. It's 43% cheaper to give a homeless person a home, a place to live, food, medical care, and training than it's to leave them on the streets. 43% cheaper, because for many areas, more than half the police time, and police are very expensive, are used managing homeless people. A lot of the time of the fire department is being called out on emergency calls for homeless people. A lot of the emergency room visits and hospitals are used for homeless people. So one homeless person, if they call regularly, can use $100,000, $200,000 of $300,000, $400,000, where they could be housed and provided with lots of services for $18,000 to $20,000 a year.
Yeah, like that guy that I called the ambulance for a couple weeks ago.
Yes.
Fire truck came. There was 4 or 5 people on the truck. They were taking him to a hospital, emergency room. Maybe he was going to be in there, let's say 3 to 4 days. I don't know how many days. He had big sores on his leg. He had a lot of problems. What do you think that cost just for just that?
Hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, I mean,
And it's a very interesting thing that I've actually had a few homeless people admit to me that they stepped onto the street in front of a car to be hit by a car, so that they would be taken to an emergency room, given care, given food, and had a place to sleep.
I would absolutely believe that. That seems like the only choice you might have at that point. It's like
out of desperation.
Yeah. How do we help as individuals that are doing okay? How do we help that situation? Obviously, we can vote for things, and that's probably the easiest thing. But
it's not the easiest thing. First of all, that I believe my whole project is a public awareness project. So I've worked with the county for the last 12 years. I've worked with the Mayor Garcetti's office. I've worked with the County Board of Supervisors. I've done 30 exhibitions for them. I've worked with many nonprofits. I've helped with planning and coming up with plans for governmental intervention.
Mm-hmm.
The importance of having a groundswell of support is crucial. And that's part of why I've emphasized public awareness, because I've worked with some county supervisors who had me do exhibitions in certain areas and doing certain things because they wanted to change votes on the board or on other for certain bond issues, and they believe that my exhibitions have helped pass those bond issues. And that so that's very, very important. And the attitude towards homelessness has actually hardened over COVID, hardened over these years. People who once I experienced as very supportive of the plight of the homeless are now very, very angry. And so the amount of anger at homelessness and at homeless people and the blaming of the victim has actually increased quite dramatically. So I think that these services will only be there if we can get behind it. And I'm sorry to say that there's things on an individual basis. Saying hello and a smile means a lot, because a lot of these people feel like they're treated like they're nothing and they're pieces of trash. Giving, in my car, when I'm driving around, I carry dollars, I carry granola bars, I carry underwear, I carry shirts. And, I'll just pass by someone and they'll ask, I'll give them some money, I'll give them granola bars, I'll give them some new underwear, you'd be surprised, some socks and some other things. And they're very, very grateful. So that's things you can do. I also believe that volunteering at organizations, there's a lot of great organizations doing work with the homeless. And I just want to compliment the nonprofits, the synagogues, the churches, and the religious organizations are really doing great work. And we need to be working as a community. But I also want to say that Philip Anston, who was British, Sir Philip Anston, was a site visitor from the UN, and every year or every 2 years, the UN sends site visitors to look at every country in the world and give a report on how human rights, on the treatment of people and medical care and the standard of living. And Philip Anston, about 3 years ago, said, the United States is unusually cruel and stigmatizing of its poor, that it is the champion of income inequality contributing to homelessness, and that he was appalled at how we were treating the poor and the homeless.
The champion of
income inequality.
Well, yeah, that's pretty obvious. It's amazing when I was, look through on the internet and look at articles. There are so many things about praising huge sums of money being made. It's almost like a worship of the almighty dollar, and you're like, well, where's some articles about helping other people? It's like, I don't care if somebody has $60 million. It doesn't interest me. I don't want to meet them. I don't want their money. I don't, it's like...
It's like what happened to praising teachers who've devoted their lives to children. You know what I mean? I think that our society has glorified money and material goods, and it doesn't feel... I must admit, I make a very nice living. I work with a lot of very wealthy people, but money doesn't fill the psychological hole inside of people.
No, if you've got an emptiness, that's not going to fix it.
But you know what? Being of service and helping other people, physiologically and emotionally, can and does. Helping someone else, actually, they've done studies, releases all sorts of endorphins that make you feel better and happier. And then you also feel altruistic, which helps generate very positive feelings inside yourself and increases one's self-esteem. Stealing from another, taking from another, it doesn't necessarily do that. It may make you feel bad.
Or you're masking how bad you feel with some other types of issues that go on, justification and entitlement and arrogance, and it would actually make you hate people that aren't like that because they are a reminder that you are not really operating from your highest self.
And it's kind of interesting to me because I'm Jewish, but the Jewish religion has many of the similar, it's the underpinnings of a lot of Christianity. But Jesus talked about helping each other and treating others as you want to be treated, and helping the poor, and that the richest people, the wealth, rich people, it's hard for them to go through the eye of the needle to get to heaven or something like that. But that, you know what I mean, that he glorified those who help the poor and this is codified in our religious teachings of our country, and we're supposed to be interested in family values, and we're all a family, and we need to help each other.
Yeah, when you think about what happened to him because of it, it's that is monumentally sad to me that somebody of such high character and altruism was destroyed by other people who couldn't handle it.
Yes.
Couldn't handle it. So
they were threatened.
Yeah. But back to your paintings. Because,
yes, the paintings.
Because you have a book. Let's talk about the book, because you were kind enough to give me a copy of the book, which I...
Open Your Heart Through Art, Portraits of Human Souls and Their Stories, where there are many portraits and bios of each person, concise bios, and I explain the whole rationale of my work and my method of painting and my perspective on society. And it was a labor of love and took many, many years to paint all these paintings and to have them beautifully shown.
You've been doing this for what,
12 years.
Oh, 12 years. That's amazing.
Yes, 25 hours a week for 12 years.
It certainly shows in the book the dedication to helping these folks. Is there anybody that you are particularly enamored with their success after meeting with them? A change?
There's a woman. She was young. She's been on the street since she was 14, and she had a very rough childhood before 14, and then survived in Boston for a while, and then came out, hitchhiked to Los Angeles, and her name was Spider, and she was a very smart and very wonderful person, but tough, because on the streets, and she was pretty. A pretty young girl is usually raped repetitively and attacked and maybe even been held hostage and done things to. But she was tough, and she actually went to college. She got into a college while she was homeless, went to college, graduated, and is now working on her doctorate, and she's studying homelessness.
Now, that's somebody that knows from the inside out. That's a
right.
Valuable person to this society. Wow.
Yes, very cool person.
I wanted to throw this in. I watched this. There's a YouTube channel called Soft White Underbelly. Mm-hmm. If you want to get an idea of what we're talking about in terms of the history of a lot of these folks, there's a guy that does this channel, and he goes down to Skid Row as well as some other places, but he interviews marginalized type of individuals and goes into their past. And it really is a testament to how much trauma is a factor in all this stuff. You really come away with a compassion and an understanding of why somebody is the way they are, as opposed to going, oh, that's just some homeless person. And it's drug addicts and prostitutes and gang members and just general homeless people. And he really does a nice job of bringing out their histories and why they are the way they are. And a lot of, and I want to get into this because you're a psychologist, the mental health piece.
Yes. Well, I think that what I would say again is so many people don't have a good family. I'm sorry to say, our families are fractured in this country. This is not a family-friendly country. We barely have parental leave to help children if they're ill, or parental leave to take care of a newborn. And there aren't it's so expensive. I mean, it takes almost a whole person's salary to get decent childcare so you can go to work. And sometimes the childcare costs as much as the salary that you get from working. And so people are so financially distressed and not cared for. The vacation time, so many people who are very successful, they work 100 hours a week, and then they're afraid to take their vacation because they may fall behind their competitive colleagues, and so it's kind of, and if you don't have time off and you don't have time to go home to your family is messed up.
Yeah, it's race to nowhere.
Race to nowhere.
I'm always amazed at what some people are willing to do in order to what they think is getting ahead. And what are you getting ahead of? Because there's a lack of balance. And, money's great. There's only two things wrong with it. Not enough and too much.
Yes.
And if you're scrambling for the too much and your too much feels like it's not enough, that's a problem.
Yes. But I think that a lot of this country is just scrambling to make ends meet. And it's a very hard situation. So you want to ask your question again?
I forgot it.
Oh, okay.
That's how good I am at what I do. I was talking about mental health, actually.
Right. Okay.
The mental health piece,
and
how do we handle those issues? And because a lot of the homeless people do. Obviously, if I was homeless for 30 days, I would have a mental health issue.
That's exactly right. Anyone who's on the streets for any length of time has probably been attacked, starved, mistreated, and felt endangered, and their PTSD, and if they drink alcohol, it's understandable because if you slept on cement at night, I know it's the pain in your body is pretty intense. So you have to take alcohol and drugs to just keep the pain down on your body. And
sure.
And you see them limping. There's all sorts of things going on. So okay, mental health. Well, I've talked originally about how trauma is happening early, contributing to their homelessness. And then the lack of family and family connections and supportive environments to help you heal. And I think that our society is riddled with trauma. If you think about the amount of kids who've been touched by gun violence and people coming in and shooting up people in schools, just the gun violence alone has made so many people frightened. And there is so much stress and strain and families fragmented that people don't have supports. If you look at happiness levels in this country, they're actually not that high. If you look at even rural Mexico in these little towns, happiness levels are much happier because they have intact families many times or communities that they know for a long time. The amount of address changes in Los Angeles but it means that people are estranged and alienated. And so when you talk about mental health, I'm sorry I may make this harsh, but not harsh, but Bessel van der Kolk is the biggest name in trauma. And they asked him a question: what do you think about having a mental health clinic in a school? And he said, that's a fabulous idea, but it needs to be completely conceptualized. More than half of all children in schools have been touched by gun violence. There's all sorts of trauma and mistreatment and family distress, so that most kids in most schools are carrying a lot of mental health pain. The amount of suicides of young kids, the amount of anorexia, the amount of eating disorders, the amount of anxiety disorders, the amount of depression and suicidality is skyrocketing in all these schools. So you don't want to have a mental health in the corner of a school. You want to turn the school into a healing experience. And a way of teaching and a way of running the school. Like he wants people to come into school and start with some meditation and possibly yoga. And then at some point in the school to have collective songs where people sing. just breaks in the day, not take away from the academics, but a break in the day where everyone sings together. Singing is so good for your mental health. Music is so good for your mental health. And, exercise, and so that we have a healing school. We need a healing society. And when you have people belittling, our leaders belittling people who are disabled or calling people names, it's not a good example to create a healing society. I think we've disinhibited a meanness which is now eating away at our core of our society.
It sounds like what he's talking about, what you're talking about, is creating a community, taking a larger city and making the schools part of that community. I recall that when I was a kid, that where my parents lived in Ohio, that we lived in a suburb and people knew each other. And the schools did a lot of this stuff. There were music programs. I remember, this was one of the greatest memories I have. I think I was like, how old are you in second grade? 8, 9, something like that. The teacher brought in a butter churn. A butter churn. Filled it with the cream, and you shake it, and there was a song, like an old sort of country song, that each person passed it around in a circle and shook this butter churn. And we sang this song. We did it for, 30, 40 minutes. I don't remember. And we had butter at the end of this experience. And there was fresh bread. And we spread the butter on the bread. And why do I remember that more than anything I learned academically? Because it was an experience. It was community. It was super fun. And it was grounded in something that was very real.
Yes. Well, I think that we need to think about integrating our society. A tremendous untapped source are our seniors, who are usually today in our society corded off and put in these homes,
Yeah.
and they die off there. They're depressed and isolated, and almost just bringing in a core of seniors who would love to help tutor children in reading. And mentor the children. A lot of people in that age group don't have family connection, don't have children of their own, don't have grandchildren. And that's this whole experience of connecting people up together. We need to connect people up together. And one programs that are sometimes useful with homeless people is connecting them up with the families they used to be connected to. It's an interesting thing that most homeless people actually once lived in permanent dwellings within 7 to 10 miles of where they are right now.
Oh, okay.
And so that when you want to give a homeless person a housing 40 miles or 50 miles away, they don't sometimes want to leave because this is the neighborhood they've lived in their whole life. And they know people in the area, and they want to, and they're familiar with it. And it's their sense of home, even though they don't have their house anymore. They're living on the streets in the neighborhood where they lost their house.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that would be, there is some importance to the area that you grow up in. There's a connection to those streets and those trees and those buildings. The familiarity there's a comfort in it, even if you're in a bad situation. I was reading this article, speaking of seniors, because a lot of seniors feel, they lack purpose. They've retired and they're not producing anything in the workforce or making money, and maybe they feel alone. And, that idea of bringing them into schools is amazing. And I was reading about this, and it wasn't here in the United States. It was somewhere else. They took senior living facilities, because a lot of people do need extra assistance and care, and they moved college students applied to live there. And part of what they were screened, obviously, so they weren't, party animals and stuff like that. Yes. And they would help the seniors, and the seniors would sort of help them. But it was in exchange for lower rent. It was a win-win for everybody.
Yes.
Because the younger people were brought in, fresh ideas, they were able to help the seniors. The seniors felt empowered.
And the seniors help the young kids. Yeah. Young kids don't have mentors in our society so much. I went to a state university, and my introduction to psychology course had 1,000 students in it. One instructor.
I took that class.
1,000 students. What sort of connection can you have with that professor if there's 1,000 students sitting in the auditorium with you? And if you are volunteering and you have this connection with a grandfather or a grandmother figure who can mentor you and explain what's important in life from a deeply important experience. And it's interesting, I was recently in a senior living home, and I saw these people looking not so good, and I thought ugh, and I just sat down and I talked to some of them. There were all these very accomplished, interesting, smart people, and they had a lot to offer, but they have no one to give it to.
Yeah.
So, and if you look at longevity, like I looked at psychologists and longevity, it had to do with exercising every day, so exercise, eating well, but also having a project that they were passionate about and having people they could talk to and relate to each day.
And how do people find that if they're not in an organization like, churches kind of were supposed to do that, and synagogues? I think one of the things that have been easiestly built in our life as a species has been,
parenting. But a lot of people today are not parenting. And it's quite a job. And I know that, like my parents, I love them, but they didn't do such a great job with me. But they were fabulous grandparents. Did you know what I mean? Fabulous grandparents. And so, the role of a grandparent can be so important. My relationships with my mother's parents was so deep and important that it was, offset a lot of the lack of my parents. You know what I mean? So that's an important lesson. And we need those multi-generations. I feel like I feel fortunate that I had that myself.
Yeah. My grandfather on my mother's side was one of my closest friends. He could do things that my dad couldn't do.
Yeah.
So it filled in some areas that my dad was not able to do. He was a great dad too, but there were things. They were very different people. That my grandfather was an immigrant from Russia. He was a carpenter. He built his life up from the ground up. And my dad was born here, and he was, in business. They were very different. They loved each other too, though. It was really kind of great to see these different abilities and different coming from different places, but the love overcame any sort of difference, which there wasn't a lot of difference. It was really, I feel now that I'm talking about it, I feel very blessed that I had that.
Yes.
Yeah. And my grandfather was one of the funniest guys. He loved to laugh. Where that came from, I don't know. And it became something that he was, I think, probably the first person that showed me there was a way to look at the world that was humorous.
Yes.
And I mean, as a really small kid, and I later became a comedian as my profession.
Yes, I noticed.
Yeah. Not doing it right now.
No, but you do throw some in there.
Once in a while. Yeah.
Yes. So what I'd like to talk about for a second is that what we're talking about is how human connection and interaction and seeing each other as real human beings with strengths and weaknesses and things to offer each other are so important. And that's why when we look at a homeless person and we label them a homeless person and they're really just human beings with a soul and a lot of experience, that we don't really see the value in that human being. And part of what I'm trying to do is give people a deeper look into the visual experience of seeing the person, have them, and my paintings are designed to look into your eyes as you look into their eyes, and to feel the presence and feel the energy of the other person and feel a connection, and then to read the story and realize that this is a human being with a whole history, a complex history of pain, of loss, of trauma, but also of success, a stockbroker, having two PhDs, having a law degree, having been a veteran, having graduated from UC Berkeley, really getting to know them and sensing that there's value there. And we as a nation are throwing away these valuable resources. These people who could become tax-paying members of our society, who have something to offer and to contribute. And that's part of what I love about all sorts of organizations that really take care of it. Like Homeboy is a nice organization that really develops the human being and helps them become a contributing member of our society. Here are these ex-cons. But there are many good programs like that, but these need to be brought to scale, meaning these need to be throughout the country. These don't need to be one-off in a corner in one city in one place. We need to have this as a kind of like, we used to have the Conservation Corps. FDR created the New Deal, and we had the work programs, and people got jobs and they were able to do something. And we need to give jobs and help people get jobs and develop them as human beings. And so many of the homeless people also become counselors at homeless shelters, and they can be really developed, and they have a lot of skills and they have a lot of talent. And if you sit with many different homeless people, you find out this is a profoundly, wonderfully deep human being, and we are destroying them and throwing them away.
Yeah, you said something right at the beginning of that I thought was a very. You talked about labels. We are a big purveyor of labeling people and categorizing them. And when you label a situation or a person, you diminish them. You move them to the side, and you make them almost like dismissible. It's like, well, you're lazy, so I'm not going to deal with you. You're some, and I think the other thing a lot of people feel is that when you have programs that those people that are been labeled are going to take advantage of those programs and not be able to become something more, and that you're being duped. And I think a lot of people feel that way. That and I'll say this: I don't think most people want to take advantage of a situation or a program. Yeah, there's a percentage of people that will do that. Whatever that percentage is, it's not really high, I don't think. I think most people want to feel loved, they want to feel valued, they want to feel productive, and they want to feel like they have a purpose. And if you give them a situation where they can do that, they're not going to take advantage.
Well, I think there's always people who will take advantage in any program.
A percentage.
But we're making. I think they're. It's interesting. A poor person steals a loaf of bread and they go to jail. A rich person steals $100 million and they get a slap on the hands. You know what I mean?
And a book and a movie.
And a book and a movie. That's right. You got it. So, we need to take in that a lot of what we call taking advantage of a program is insecurity of that person thinking that they can make it without somehow doing that. And we need to help them over that hurdle. So people need help, and then they're very fearful, and then they need more help to get over the next hurdle to feel that they have the confidence to make it in the world and have the life they really want. I have never met a homeless person who wanted to be homeless. They're in a situation that is very dire and very painful. Usually if there's some wanting, it's that they've lost hope that they can get anything else. And so we just have to keep helping people hope for, get, and be supported to the point where they can function and have more.
I did read an article that was saying that you can be taken anything under $35,000. It's not worth working because you can get that for free.
It's not so easy. I
read it and I was like, oh man, that's not an incentive to work.
A friend of mine became homeless, and I know the heads of many homeless organizations and providers for housing for people who are experiencing homelessness, and It took myself and my wife. I have 2 PhDs. My wife has a master's. She's a brilliant person. And we have a computer, and we have a phone, and we have email, and we have technical knowledge, and we filled out forms for that person, and we had to have financial statements, and we dealt with banks for that person. And it took us almost 2 years to get them housing.
Wow.
So, and I talked to a lot of the heads of the providers of homeless housing units for homelessness, and there's a priority for people to get housing who've been homeless for more than 5 years.
Yeah.
By the time you've been homeless for 5 years, you are a demolished human being.
Yeah.
And what we need to do is I feel like the money is going towards a situation where, a little bit of money helping people prevent losing their homes and losing their housing saves a lot of money. A stitch in time saves nine.
Prevention.
And prevention. So preventing homelessness, having programs to help people have mental health services. Do you know that getting mental health services through the county or in our nation right now is so hard, yet most everybody needs it?
Yeah. I mean, just somebody to tell the truth to and feel safe to doing it.
Yes.
Like you.
Oh, well, thank you. Yes. I've spent 47 years being a psychoanalyst and a therapist and treating some of the most beat up trauma survivors, and it's been profoundly meaningful. So I also want to say that the work I've done with people who are experiencing homelessness, human beings are experiencing homelessness, it's been so gratifying to me. And back to that thought about helping others really is a gift to me. I feel that this whole project has been a gift to me because I enjoy all the wonderful things I have so much more because I don't take them for granted. I feel so proud of myself for helping the people I've helped and the work that I'm doing. It's been just such a wonderful, uplifting experience. It may not seem that way. I know it's depressing and I've cried a lot and it's been heartbreaking and it's been terrible, but it's been in the end a real big net plus in my life. And so I feel like being of service to other people is in the end not a cost to you, but something that gives you so much more and so much more happiness in your life.
That is as beautiful of a section of talk I've ever heard. That was fantastic. I don't know why I called it a section of talk, but that was a beautiful thought. And thank you for talking to me today. And I hope folks take it into their hearts of what Stuart has just talked about and what we've just talked about. And let's say you can get Stuart's book
on Amazon.com.
Okay, say the name again.
Open Your Heart Through Art, Portraits of Human Souls and Their Stories. And you can also access it through my website, stuartperlmanartist.com, StuartPerlman artist.com.
Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me and having me. And I so enjoy your company. You are funny and you are engaging. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Thanks for listening to The Exploding Human. Check out the website, theexplodinghuman.com, the YouTube channel, The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman, and The Exploding Human Facebook page. Once again, big thanks to Stuart Perlman. You can get his book, as he mentioned, on his website, stuartperlmanartist.com. Thank you for listening and have a fabulous day. Much appreciation.